We are going to get this debate underway very soon. I'm Marlena Wapp, and first of all, I want to say, as a Gumulgal person of Mabiag Island in the Torres Strait, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of these lands, the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. My deep respect to the elders. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the debate format. Stephen Miles and David Crisafulli have both agreed to these terms. It's the one thing they can agree on. Firstly, each leader will be invited to address you all for 5 minutes, highlighting their plans to shape the state over the next 4 years. I'll be ringing a bell at the 4.5-minute mark. Actually, I have the bell and they've given me a box to stand on today, so it's really giving me a whole new perspective up here, I must say. So after that, they will then have the opportunity to ask each other 2 questions each, and the answers must stick closely to 2 minutes. After this, we will open up to the media for the club's standard question time, and a lot of the journalists are at the back of the room and they have been following both leaders over the past fortnight. The debate will end with each leader being allowed to ask one final question and then provide their 2 minutes of closing remarks. I'd now like to invite the Premier, Stephen Miles, and the Leader of the Opposition Leader to the stage. An awkward handshake or not? I don't know. Okay, as you saw earlier, we had the coin toss. The opposition leader has elected to be the first speaker. Over to you.
Thanks, Marlena. Premier, ladies and gentlemen, the question I've asked many times during this campaign is, after 10 years of this government, are things better or worse when it comes to youth crime, health, housing, cost of living, and who's got the right plan for Queensland's future? Today I'm going to pose another question. What does it mean for Queensland to wake up on the 27th of October to a 4th term and 14 years of this government? What does it mean to Victor White, who lost his wife allegedly at the hands of repeat young offenders, and the other 289,657 victims of the youth crime crisis? And what does it mean for the safety of your family in the next 4 years? What does it mean for Noah and Lara, part of the 36.5% of Queenslanders who don't own a home, the lowest percentage in the country? Or Helen, who I met at Foodworks yesterday, who's one of the 45,987 Queenslanders on the social housing waiting list? And what does it mean to you and your family and the pressures your household budget is under? What does it mean for Ravi and his staff at the pizza shop in Mansfield, who I went and spoke to the other day? He's had to sell his home just to keep the business alive. His staff are losing the hours, multiple break-ins, rising pressure. And what does it mean to your cost of living pressures in your family? And what does it mean for Lauren, who lost her dad, Wayne, at the end of an ambulance ramp? One of the Queenslanders who are suffering from the 45% ambulance ramping over the last 6 months. It's the highest figure ever recorded in any Australian state or territory. Imagine waking up to 4 more years of that. Or a vote for change, a fresh start. Let me tell you what that looks like. Fewer victims, the Making Queensland Safer laws by the end of the year. Adult crime, adult time. But we're also going to do gold standard early intervention, crime prevention schools, a child safety department that helps the vulnerable children, a residential care sector that ensures those 2,000 kids have hope into the future. Rehabilitation with purpose. Every single young person who leaves detention will have a 12-month plan, not the 72 hours they get at the moment, to stop that pipeline returning into our youth prisons. A plan for greater home ownership. less vulnerable Queenslanders sleeping rough. How are we going to do that? Supply, an infrastructure partnership with local government to get houses out of the ground again. A shared equity scheme for young Queenslanders who don't have access to the bank of mum and dad. We are going to remove a tax. Young Queenslanders buying or building their first brand new home will not pay 1 cent of stamp duty. The faith-based sector will be given the keys to unlock 10,000 social homes working with that vibrant community housing sector, and every single cent of the Housing Investment Fund will deliver new supply. It's a plan to unlock supply. And then a plan for immediate and long-term structural cost of living pressure relief. Rebates, cheaper fares, a solar for renters scheme to ensure the immediate pressures are dealt with, but a long-term focus for affordable, reliable, sustainable electricity through a maintenance guarantee. Making sure that we put downward pressure on insurance by building flood mitigation and dealing with the youth crime crisis, and transport to get people to and from work with better quality roads and more reliable public transport. And respect for your money, doing things on time and on budget, the way that governments once did things. And a plan to end the Queensland health crisis. A commitment to get ambulance ramping back under 30%. We'll stop the July 1 introduction of the patients tax. Real-time health data. Triaging, getting our transit lounges working the way they should, and 7-day discharges. Doctors and nurses back in charge. Every single health and hospital network will have at least one frontline clinician who works in that system sitting around that board to make sure that our system performs for those who give so much working in it. And delivering the beds in the pipeline that are needed, but also making sure that we finally deal with step-up, step-down facilities to address the mental health challenges Queenslanders are facing. That's our plan for Queensland. That's our plan for a fresh start. Now, Labor's plan will be about a scare campaign, things that aren't in that plan. But after 10 years, that's all they have left. I'm offering hope over fear, a fresh start for Queensland's future.
Premier, over to you.
Thank you, Marlena, and thank you, David. I said at the outset that this campaign would be about two things: who you trust most to address the cost of living and to deliver a plan for our state's future. And on cost of living, I'm running on my record. Being Queensland's Premier is the greatest honour of my life, and in the last 10 months, I have worked hard to deliver for Queenslanders. On cost of living, the biggest cost of living package any state or territory has ever delivered. The Putting Queensland Kids First plan, something I'm really passionate about, making sure our young Queenslanders get the opportunity at a great life. 50-cent public transport fares, a plan to deliver GP clinics right across the state that bulk bill, a plan to keep down the price of fuel and deliver competition where there is insufficient competition right now, a plan to build 900,000 homes in the southeast and a more than $3 billion Homes for Queenslanders plan, and a community safety plan that is working, including new helicopters, new police helicopters in Townsville and Cairns and Wide Bay and the Sunshine Coast. Just yesterday, police data confirmed that youth crime had gone down 6% in the 9 months to September. In those 10 months, we have worked hard, we have listened to the evidence, and we have turned a corner. And every single one of those days, I have been honest and upfront with Queenslanders. I've told them what I believe and what I will do. And my opponent has the opposite approach. He won't answer Queenslanders' questions. He can't give an honest answer about what he believes when it comes to women's reproductive rights, despite being asked 131 times now. He can't give an honest answer on how many small pumped hydros will be needed to replace the big one he intends to cancel, nor answer a simple question about what he believes on nuclear power. He can't tell Queenslanders how he is funding his more than $17 billion of election commitments. He can't give a straight answer on coal royalties or Olympic stadiums either. Instead, what we get is carefully rehearsed slogans. And so when you hear those slogans, when you hear him say that his plans are fully funded and fully costed, think, if they're fully costed, why won't he tell me how he's paying for them? When he says that's not part of my plan, ask yourself, is he actually ruling it out? Would he actually stop it? What does he believe in his heart, whether that's on nuclear or on women's access to abortion? And when he tells you that things were better 10 years ago, think, is he seriously telling me that things were better under Campbell Newman? Is he seriously saying that that was a better government? When he says hope over fear, remember what happened last time the LNP said we had nothing to fear. And look at our campaigns. His campaign is entirely based on fear, whereas we have laid out a hopeful plan for our state's future. One with cheaper energy and cheaper fuel, 50-cent public transport fares, bulk billing GPs, one where we can afford to give our young Queenslanders in primary school one decent, nutritious meal every day, all because we have a growing economy that supports low unemployment. That is a vision of hope. The only people who can see hope in the LNP's plan is the coal companies that they've met with 35 times and who are funding all of those billboards you see around town. There is no hope in their plan for women who should rightly fear for their rights. This election is important. It is about who do you trust, and I am running on my record and the fact that every single day I turn up and be honest with Queenslanders.
David Crisafulli, your first question.
Thanks, Marlena. Premier, adult crime, adult time is part of a plan to change youth justice laws that your Labor government weakened. It will impose adult time for juveniles committing adult crimes, including life for murder and raising the sentencing cap for manslaughter, serious harm like wounding, home and business break-ins and robbery, and stealing cars and dangerous operation of vehicles. Stephen, regardless of the election result next Saturday, will you today commit to making these laws by Christmas?
Well, thanks for your question, David. And first of all, can I correct you? That's not a plan, that is a slogan. It's a four-word slogan that even your own team admits came out of a focus group. It's not thought through. You can't find a single expert to stand up with you and say it will make a difference. It's estimated to increase the detention population by 50%. You say that will happen by Christmas, but there is no detailed plan for how you will accommodate all of those additional detainees. And so you might be able to run on a slogan when you're the opposition, but when you're the government, you need an actual plan. And that's what we have with our community safety plan, and we know that it is working. Extra police resources, new intervention programs, preventing crime before it occurs, building new detention capacity because we have introduced tougher laws. That's what our comprehensive plan is, that's what it delivers, and it trumps a four-word slogan any day.
I guess that's no, and that means more youth crime, more victims of crime, more headache and more...
Is this a question, Marlena, or another statement?
Your question now, Premier.
Thank you, Marlena. David, you say that you're going to cut the Pioneer Burdekin pumped hydro project and that you will replace it with smaller pumped hydro schemes, which would be estimated to require 70 smaller pumped hydro projects at a greater cost. Can you tell Queenslanders how many smaller pumped hydros you will build, how many megawatts they will deliver in total, how much they'll cost, and where they'll be located?
Well, no, only you and your ministers have used the figure 70. So allow me to explain what
you add up the megawatts. That's how you get to 70.
Allow me to explain what a vision for energy looks like.
Go for it.
Firstly, the baseload power that has underpinned this state for generations and must continue to underpin the state needs to be put back online. And over 1,000 days ago, the power station at Callide exploded because the government didn't maintain it. They then spent the better part of $40 million covering that fact up. But unfortunately for Queenslanders, that has resulted in electricity increasing by 19.9%. That's 3 times the national average. So we have a plan to make sure we deliver a maintenance guarantee to keep that on. We also have a plan to transition to renewable energy, and part of that involves storage. The first cab off the rank is the Burrumba pumped hydro plan, which unfortunately under the current government has blown out from $6 billion to $14 billion. Now, we don't believe that is the case. We believe with diligence it can be delivered. The private sector also has a big thirst to deliver more of these projects. What we won't be doing is embarking on a $24 billion thought bubble, a plan that doesn't have planning approval, traditional owner consent, an environmental impact statement. The Premier can't say how much it will cost or what the impact on people's bills will be, nor when it will be delivered. And I'm not going to be prepared to sign Queenslanders up to that. We have a plan that is affordable, it will deliver reliable energy, and it will be efficient and environmentally sustainable. That's a plan. It's not a $24 billion wrecking ball through Queenslanders' household budgets.
Your second question, Opposition Leader.
Premier, 12 months ago, you promised Queenslanders ambulance ramping would be below 28% by the middle of this year. Today, the latest figures show it's nearly 45%. That's the worst 6 months ever recorded in any Australian state or territory. Because your government didn't do what matters when it mattered, will you admit you are incapable of curing the Queensland health crisis?
Well, thank you for your question, David. First of all, can I say Queensland has a world-class health system, and I am very proud of it. I'm proud of every single one of our health workers who work in our health system. I will never call them duds, and I will never sack them. They have been working incredibly hard, and across just about every national measure, they outrank all of the other states. The median seen-in time at our EDs is just 15 minutes. For Category 1 patients, every single one is seen within 2 minutes. When it comes to patient off stretcher time, which David likes to call ramping, that has seen an improvement over the last quarter thanks to our investments, including increasing the health budget by 11% and continuing to grow the health workforce, those hard-working emergency department nurses and doctors, as well as our paramedics. As I say, that has turned a corner on post while we've seen great improvements across all of the other measures, including elective surgery seen on time. So while David might prefer to talk down our health system, I am proud of them and I know how hard they are working.
And your second question, Premier.
Thank you, Marlena. 35 times you or your shadow ministers have met with coal mining companies, executives or lobby groups. You gave a speech at a parliamentary function this week recently, where you said they could take your commitments to the bank. What are those commitments?
That when we set a tax scheme, it should count for something, because before the last election, the government promised 26 times there'd be no new or increased taxes, and they broke that 7 times. And in the process, what happens when a government can't conduct itself with certainty, people build in sovereign risk. Now, we've told the coal industry what I've told you privately, what we've voted in the parliament, and what I'll tell this room. There will be no changes. That royalty regime is baked into the Fords, and it should remain so. But what good governments do is consult and listen. And when you make a promise, it's got to count for something. As we've seen with doctors who've been whacked with a patient's tax, that for 2 years the government denied its existence, and then at 2 minutes to midnight somehow they want to pretend that if they're re-elected they will remove the tax that is waiting on the books from the 1st of July. People don't believe you anymore.
The AMA asked you to stop saying that.
They don't believe you anymore.
The AMA asked you to stop saying that.
The AMA have put out a statement saying what a wrecking ball this would be for their industry. And if you want to join us in axing a Labor tax, we'll have a bipartisan ticket on that one. What I'm saying to you, every one of you in this state, is that a word of a government should count for something. And unfortunately, time's up for this government. They don't have the credibility to say that their word can be taken to the bank because they broke it so many times. And what I'm offering Queenslanders is certainty. And whether that's a mum and dad who wants to start a small business, a young person who wants to be the first person in their family to buy a house, or someone who wants to invest millions in this state, it's got to count for something. The word of the government has to count for something. And respect for your money is something that I value.
All right, well, you're going to go to questions from the journalists at the back of the room soon. But first of all, you've both been on the official campaign trail for 16 days now. It feels a lot longer than that. I have a question for you both. A lot of campaign events require planning, obviously, but your interaction with voters can seem quite controlled or staged at times when the cameras are filming. I'm curious to know, how willing are you both to take more risks on the road in these final 10 days? And if so, what would that look like?
I think it's very important. And I've spent a lot of time at pre-poll, and people get the opportunity to come and tell you what their view is about all manner of things. I think that's a very important part of the democratic process. You mentioned about interacting with Queenslanders. It is difficult, Marlena, when there's 8 cameras over your shoulder and a whole heap of lights, and that makes it tough for the individual. I mentioned the person I met at Foodworks the other day.
For the individual, as in the politician?
For the Queenslander who's got the lights of the world on them. I mentioned the Queenslander I met at the Foodworks the other day, and she's on the verge of homelessness. Now, after the cameras stopped rolling, I went and spoke with her. And yesterday, my candidate in the Redlands, Rebecca Young, connected her with a service provider. Now, that's a Queenslander who's got a tough story that you mightn't see it, you mightn't report on it, but it matters to her and it matters to me. And I love meeting Queenslanders. That to me is one of the great parts of this job, and I'm sure Stephen agrees with that.
Yeah, I'm having a great time on the campaign, Marlena, especially loving the shopping centre walks and the street walks and the kindy visits and the school visits, dropping in on pre-poll and seeing our candidates and supporters there and helping them to greet voters. So I'll be doing as much as I can to meet as many Queenslanders as I can between now and the 26th. I think the point David makes about the pack, though, is right. I dropped in on a little girl in Bulimba, Lottie, and the sight of 5 snappers and 7 cameras and a couple of microphones did upset her a little bit. So we've got to get the balance right.
It sounds like you're both blaming the media.
Well, Marlena, in the spirit of transparency...
Isn't that fair?
I said to the Premier before, the other day, I hopped out to make a visit and there was 9 of you waiting, and all I needed to do is get to the bathroom, and it's too late. You're there, the cameras are on, and away you go. It's one of the pressures of a campaign.
All right, we'll see how the final 10 days goes. All right, we're going to go to the back of the room where the microphones are.
Here we go.
We've got over to you, Tim.
G'day, Tim Arvia from Channel 9. David, a question to you about abortion, which has been a big issue on the campaign so far. You've avoided talking about a conscience vote, but on Monday you gave your personal guarantee that there would be no changes. In the first debate, you said you would stand down if crime victim numbers didn't go down. Will you also stake your leadership on no changes to abortion law?
Well, Tim, the Premier said I've been asked 131 times, so I'm glad this makes it 132. There'll be no changes. And the reason why I can say that is I know my team and my team back it. And this guy doesn't even remember the name of 2 of his team. I know my team and I know what they stand for, and I know the position we're taking to the election. And I want every person in this room to know that we are not changing that law. Now, I've said it privately, I've said it publicly, and despite that, the vitriol online continues. And so I'm saying to you, it's not part of our plan and there won't be changes. Now, that's very definitive. And the reason why I can be that definitive is I've got a team that backs that position.
So if you're backing your team, will you stake your leadership on it?
Tim, I would suggest to you if there were changes to that, I wouldn't be a very popular person amongst Queenslanders. There won't be a change. And I look forward in 4 years' time, if I'm given the privilege of running this state, to remind Queenslanders of the smear that was run. It has been vitriolic, it has crossed a line, and I have ruled it out.
Premier, your rebuttal? Any comments? Any rebuttal?
Oh, well, 132 times he's failed to answer that simple question.
See what
He
I mean?
won't tell Queenslanders what his own views are. Queenslanders know what I believe. I was the health minister who decriminalised abortion. I spoke on that bill. He voted against it, but did not speak on it. Queenslanders can trust me because they know my position and I am honest with them about it, rather than obfuscation and weasel words and carefully crafted, rehearsed slogans 132 times.
Marlene, if I might, I can't possibly have been more direct. And
You could.
I want to be
Are you
really,
pro-choice or not?
I want to be really, really clear. Those protections will remain in place, no change. And I want to talk about another form of protection,
What do you
considering the
believe?
Premier's opened the door, if that's okay. 12 months ago, the government made a promise that women who turned up at a hospital after they had been raped would have a forensic examination within 10 minutes. There's just been an audit report comes out that has shown victims are waiting 3 hours. One woman waited 9 hours.
Opposition Leader, we're going to keep
David
moving
answering his own
with the
questions.
questions.
So that's the kind of
Next
protection that
question.
I'd
You don't
like
get to
to
ask your
address.
own questions.
Hello. James Hall from the Fin Review. Thank you both for being here. Probably a shock to you both, but I'll ask about debt. S&P Global told us this week that the increased debt through the election spending spree had risked Queensland's AA credit rating. How much emphasis will you both put into improving that debt position, or can voters expect election sweeteners to be permanently baked into the bottom line of the budget? Oh, sorry, that's to you both. Yeah.
You pick, Marlene.
Okay, Opposition Leader or Premier, you can't decide between the both of you?
You call and we'll go.
Yes, you can go.
Debt will be lower under an LNP government because it starts with respect for your money. The days of wanton spending on consultants will be a thing of the past. The days of projects blowing out in the billions will be a thing of the past. We will not embark on a $24 billion wrecking ball of a project that doesn't stack up. And I'm sorry, but I'm not prepared to borrow approximately $2 billion for burgers at schools. I value money, and debt should be for capital expenditure, not racking up a credit card. And my great fear is if government doesn't change, based on the promises that have been made, based on the reckless spending, based on the fact there's no project discipline, there's no accountability around a cabinet table, I do fear a credit downgrade under a re-elected Labor government. That won't happen under us. We have a plan, and that plan is a lower taxes plan that respects your money, and I can categorically say debt will be lower under an LNP government.
Thanks for your question, James. We are working to a debt envelope that has been publicly disclosed and that the ratings companies are aware of, so it's already factored into their existing stable outlook for Queensland. We will return the budget to surplus in 26-27 after 2 years of deficit. Those 2 years of deficit come after 2 record surpluses, as you're aware. David has committed that debt will be lower, taxes will be lower, but somehow there will not be cuts. And you know from our costings, which are live and on our website, exactly how much we intend to spend, and we have outlined how we will fund all of those commitments. David will not tell Queenslanders how he intends to fund those commitments, including the commitment to lower debt. And it's just another example of one of the key questions in this campaign that he refuses to answer.
I just did, Marlena, and this year's cost overrun was north of $9 billion. There's just no discipline. Ministers aren't held accountable, and those days will change if government changes.
We'll keep moving now. Hayden Johnson.
Hello, Hayden Johnson from the Courier Mail. You've both spoken about being honest with Queenslanders, hope over fear, yet Queenslanders have been exposed to a scare campaign from both sides. Premier, you're basically claiming the LNP will sell hospitals. Your union has attacked a candidate's age. And Mr Crisafulli, you're claiming the Premier has laughed at youth crime and your deputy has described ministers as losers. Will you both commit today, for the last week and a half of the campaign, to a facts-based race and calling out these scare campaigns?
Questions about third-party campaigns need to go to them, but
It's your union, Premier.
What we have been doing, Hayden, is pointing out the flaw in the LNP's costings, and that given their commitment to not increase revenue and not increase debt, those commitments need to be funded through cuts. And you well know that health is far too much of the budget for you to be able to find those kinds of savings without cutting health expenditure. And we will continue to highlight that. We know that one of the worst things the Newman government did was cut our health workers, nurses and midwives and doctors, and we know that they would have to do that again. So no, we will continue to highlight that.
Well, g'day to the independent people on table 41 with Blocker and the gang, who the Premier has no correlation with. Great to have you all here today. Premier, you are here as a result of that union removing the last Premier and putting you in. So I'm sorry, you can't wipe your hands of their campaign. The campaign that has been waged against what would be the youngest woman ever to enter the Queensland Parliament is a disgrace.
Who was the previous youngest?
It's a disgrace.
Verity Barton, who you knocked off.
It is a disgrace. It is a disgrace and should be called out. Just on, Hayden, on your question, you mentioned about a scare campaign. Committing to removing a tax that's due to come in and on the books isn't a scare campaign. Committing to making sure that we hold the government accountable for their record isn't a scare campaign.
The AMA have asked you to stop saying that.
One thing that the Premier and I will do, and whilst we'll go toe-to-toe today, and that's part of the democratic process, we're always very respectful to each other. We genuinely are. But the contest of ideas has to be there. And I believe Queensland needs change. I believe the state needs a fresh start. And part of that is highlighting the record of the government that Queenslanders are living through, and the other part is putting forward our positive plans.
Next question.
Hi, Lydia Lynch from the Australian newspaper. My question's to Mr. Crisafulli. You've been running a very deliberate small target campaign, so much so that some of your federal colleagues have privately voiced concerns that you'll be left without a mandate if you win the election. You're not taking an Olympic venue plan to the election. You can't explain why exactly you oppose Peter Dutton's nuclear energy plan. You've talked about pumped hydro. You can't say where they'll be built, when they'll be built, how much they will cost. You can't tell Queenslanders how much you plan to borrow to fund your election commitments, and you've repeatedly refused to answer questions about whether you will give your MPs a conscience vote on matters of life or death. So my question is the reason why you're running such a small target campaign because, and I'm quoting you here, you believe you're going to win and win big?
Hi, Lydia. Lydia, we're the underdogs firmly, and history shows that. Of the last 12 general elections in this state, my side of politics has won one. So you can forgive me for pushing back on that.
Sorry, Mr. Crisafulli, you said in 2021 that you believed you're going to win this election and win it big.
Yeah, and any win is a big win when you're starting from having won one in the last 12. We have to win north of a dozen seats. That would be an historic and a very big win. In answer to your question, by the end of the year, there'll be new youth crime laws which are being drafted. Within 100 days, Queenslanders will see in real time what is happening in their hospitals. There will be a maintenance guarantee on our power plants with full visibility from shareholding ministers. And we've put forward the most ambitious housing plan ever taken from an opposition. So I know the Labor Party's done a pretty good job in saying their so-called target. I just say that's 4 years of discipline, not making mistakes, a unified team. And that's refreshing. And I said to you a long time ago that I'd lead a united team. Well, here we are. And in less than 2 weeks, Queenslanders can vote for change. And I have outlined a 100-day plan that has things that will be done in the first week, in the first month, by the end of the year, within 100 days. That plan is going to be a blueprint. It is in black and white. You can hold us accountable. It is ambitious, but it's the plan this state needs right now.
Premier, any rebuttal?
I think Lydia's question goes to the heart of this campaign. My opponent thinks he's going to win by so much that taking any position on anything is a risk to that. And that's why we get those kind of answers that you just heard, a kind of slogan salad full of carefully rehearsed slogans that don't mean anything. And then what I like to call foolenomics. You can somehow reduce debt, reduce revenue and not have to cut. No, you'll have to cut, and that's what his costings will show.
Gentlemen, Alison Patterson here from Queensland Country Life. And my question to you both is, what do you feel the biggest challenges are facing primary producers across Queensland? And should you attain or regain power after the election, how will you work to solve this?
Opposition Leader?
Alison, thanks for your question. I remain a primary producer, and Tegan and I still have a very small cane farm that Mum and Dad run for us. I'm mindful of what the pressures are. The pressures are rising input costs and constantly changing regulation. The pressures are a government that hasn't been prepared to build water infrastructure for a generation. The pressure is the constant dead hand of government that sits over the top of people in agriculture. And I want to give them hope. I want to give them hope that there is a future. We do have a plan to build 3 new water storage in the first term of government. We do have a plan to make sure that those input costs, the rising electricity, becomes a thing of the past. We want farmers to feel like they can invest without constant changes to regulation. We've mapped out that strategy, and I just have so much faith in the primary production sector to go on to bigger and better things, and we're very ambitious for their future, including the good people of Mossman who have been under immense pressure in their industry, and they're hanging by a thread.
Premier, your answer?
Thanks, Marlena, and thanks, Alison, for your question. It's a really good and important one. Of course, we are an agricultural state, and it's really important that we continue to support our producers. It's one of the reasons why I want to provide fresh food to our primary school students so that we can teach them to love our Queensland fresh produce. This year I've spent a lot of time with our producers, and what they've raised with me continually has been the way that they are treated by the supermarkets. And that's one of the reasons why we held that inquiry. It's also why we've appointed a food farmer commissioner. Their job will be really important, not just in being a voice for our producers with the supermarkets, but they'll also be a really strong voice for our producers in government, and I'm really looking forward to what we can achieve to support them with the support of that extra role.
All right, next question.
Hello, Jack Mackay from the ABC. My question is for the opposition leader. In 2018, the state government banned property developers from making political donations at local and state elections. At the time, you and your colleagues were critical of that ban and how it applied to state elections. Mr. Crisafulli, will you repeal the ban on property developer donations if you win this election? And will you seek to make any other changes to the state's political donation laws?
G'day, Jack. Well, the reason why we were critical is the report didn't mention state governments. It only mentioned councils, which have the planning approval. But the government of the day sought to create a special rule for developers and a different one for unions. What should happen is it should be a level playing field, Jack. Either everyone should have the same rules or no one should be able to donate. It shouldn't be, you shouldn't have a different class of people. And at the moment in the state, you have a situation where every registered union is able to spend $1 million campaigning against heavily capped environments for political parties, and you've got some Queenslanders who aren't able to donate to the process. So it should be everyone or no one. You shouldn't have different rules for different people.
So will you repeal the ban as it applies
Jack,
to property developers at state elections then?
Well, Jack, it certainly doesn't fit to youth crime, health, housing, cost of living, so it's not a day one order of business.
Sounds like you're open to it though.
You bet, Jack, because it's fundamentally and philosophically an electoral financial gerrymander. The other thing that has to change is the voting system. On 12 minutes notice, the government changed the voting system, which made compulsory preferential. The reason why that's the case is because there's this unholy alliance between the Greens and the Labor Party, and it's the reason that they stay afloat in the inner city seats. Queenslanders should go back to what the Fitzgerald recommendation was, and that is optional preferential. If you want to vote for every person, you can. If you want to vote for just one person, you can. That's a fair system. And we had multiple cracks at changing that this parliament, but the government refused to. And despite that, they'll try and somehow make preferences a big deal. Preferences should not be a thing in Queensland elections, and it won't be if government changes.
Premier, your response to that answer from the opposition leader?
I might help David with how to do a straight answer, because I think what he just said was yes, Jack.
I think that's yes, we'll keep taking those green preferences. Thank you very much.
Well,
That one's for
you,
you,
you do have a
Grace.
deal with Pauline Hanson's One Nation and the Qatar Australia Party, so
we don't want
I'd
to-
watch it.
To be clear, we don't want to preference anyone. It's your corrupt laws.
Oh, you're pretty keen to get those One Nation
And
preferences.
to Grace, I know that you like those laws very much, very, very much. We don't. We think they're fundamentally unfair.
We'll keep moving.
How's that bell going, Marlena? Brendan Smith here from 10 News First. A question to both leaders. Firstly, to the opposition leader. Obviously, the Olympics is a big ticket item that will put Queensland on the map. Fast forward to 2032, opposition leader, where would you want to see track and field for the Olympic and Paralympic Games?
Thanks, Brendan. I don't want to see it at Cusack because that's a terrible proposal and it's a temporary facility. It's poorly located and the only person who backs that is the Premier, who made a mistake looking for a pressure relief valve and unfortunately has to carry that to the election. So it won't be at Cusack. What I'm asking Queenslanders is after 1,000 days of mess, give us 100 days to sort it out. Within 100 days, an independent infrastructure delivery authority will map out a strategy that will make Queenslanders proud again. And when I talk to Queenslanders and they say, I feel embarrassed about what could happen on the world stage under the current government, I say to them, please don't, because we have time. And I want every one of you to know we do have time. When Sydney won the 2000 Games, it was 1993. So yes, there's been over 1,000 days of waste and the Premier was the responsible minister. But I'm asking Queenslanders for 100 days to sort out the mess. And in doing so, we can get back to what it was always about. Road and rail, a 20-year tourism plan, using the Paralympic Games to create accessible cities, using the disaster resilience that can come with upgrading our telecommunications. All of that's possible, and having venues that Queenslanders are proud of. All that can be achieved. I'm just asking for 100 days to mop up the mess of the last 1,000.
Premier, the opposition leader doesn't like Cusack. You do.
Well, that's another non-answer from the opposition leader. He won't give Queenslanders a straight answer about what new stadium he wants to build. I made a decision that keeping to the Olympic and Paralympic budget was important and that any additional funds should go to support Queenslanders with their cost of living. And I've been criticised for that. The Leader of the Opposition has criticised me for that. But at least people know my position. At least I have been honest about my plan. The Leader of the Opposition wants to go to the election without telling Queenslanders his plan. Now, he's hinted that he would revisit the Gabba redevelopment, which we know would dislocate the Brisbane Lions and cricket for 4 years, requiring probably another new stadium to be built, would dislocate the East Brisbane State School. He needs to explain where the warm-up track would be. And it's not good enough to say that we'll get through to the election and we'll tell you afterwards. I'm very confident that Brisbane 2032 is going to be an incredible event with fantastic venues. We do have $7.1 billion allocated, but we are also focused on delivering the infrastructure vision, including Sunshine Coast Direct Rail. And so we'll continue to fund those things as well as supporting Queenslanders with their cost of living.
All right, let's get a few more questions in now.
Hi, Savannah Meacham from Australian Associated Press. A question to both of you. Do you both believe that you've been able to step out of the shadow of your predecessors and former Premiers Anastasia Palaszczuk and Campbell Newman?
Who wants to jump in here?
Well, I reckon I have. I'm pretty proud of what we've been able to do over these last 10 months. Record cost of living relief, $1,000 energy rebates, 50-cent public transport fares, $200 fair play vouchers, 20% off rego, and we have a plan to do so much more, and that's all been this year alone. David stands there and tells you that things were better 10 years ago. That means he thinks they were better when he was there in the Campbell-Newman government.
No, Queenslanders tell me the last 10 years have been really, really tough. And crime victim numbers show it, hospital ramping numbers show it, the number of people on the social housing waiting list shows it. And the record
better
increases
under
in the
Newman.
big kitchen table bills show it. Marlena, in answer to your question, Mr Newman's made a decision to join another political party. He's now campaigning against me at this election. So I don't have to run away from a record of a government I've been involved in for the last 10 years because Mr Newman has made a different decision and gone in a different direction. And I don't wish him any ill.
Any other questions?
Is that working? Yeah, there we go. Andrew Messenger from The Guardian. Housing is, Brisbane, in fact, is Australia's second most expensive city. So if you want to buy the sort of typical home in Brisbane, you need an income of $175,000, which is twice the median income. I sort of want a yes and no answer first here, and I will hold you to this. Are house prices too high? Are they actually too high? Do you want them to go down or up?
Yes, they're too high.
David?
They are because of the...
It was yes or no.
Well, that's a yes, but
Okay.
but I do have the intellectual rigour to answer as well. So, yeah, yes.
If only.
Yes, because wages don't match the cost of doing it. And there's only one way to fix it, and it's supply. And what gets me particularly upset is when people somehow peddle false hope about all manner of things, including capping rents and some of the other kooky schemes I'm hearing. The way to fix it is supply. And I addressed early on in my contribution, we've put forward a $2 billion infrastructure fund, which has one target, and that is going to councils and saying, whoever comes first with ambitious plans to get more stock on the ground will be rewarded. The issue with house prices at the moment is because of supply. A lack of supply causes a feeding frenzy at the bottom end of the market. That means that working Queenslanders no longer believe they can own a home. People are scared when their next rental increase comes up. The social housing waiting list for the vulnerable continues to spiral out of control. And there's been 29% fewer lots released year on year for the last decade. That's the reason we're in the situation we're in. That's created that feeding frenzy. That's pushed house prices to a level that young people can't afford. Sorry for the long answer. I guess it's
I'll let you fact check that one.
May I ask a follow-up? If lots have gone down, do you want lot approvals to go back up? That definitionally means urban sprawl, doesn't it?
It can mean both, Andrew. It can mean more housing options on traditional built form. It can involve urban infill. It can have high density units. It can be people who choose to subdivide where it's applicable for the back of a property that's large enough or on a corner block, all of those things. But the one missing piece of the puzzle is infrastructure. You have to have the infrastructure, otherwise it compromises the lifestyle of the people who are there. And there hasn't been a detailed infrastructure plan in this state for a generation. There needs to be a detailed review of planning schemes, and you have to have infrastructure embedded. You need to make sure that you've got a proper plan to roll out your schools and your hospitals, your trunk infrastructure. Councils have to have a seat at the table. The federal government has to help contribute to their share of that funding. And then you roll out a vision to make sure that you can deal with it. Yes, we need more supply in all forms.
Premier?
Only just to correct David there, he said that there hasn't been a review of the infrastructure plan. We reviewed the infrastructure plan and released a new one in February.
All right. Any more questions? We'll have to keep moving. Matt?
Hey. One for the opposition leader, Matt Tanine from Brisbane Times. It was almost a year ago to the day that you said the LNP would no longer support the state's path to treaty. Your 100-day plan doesn't involve repealing that act. How long will you allow the truth-telling inquiry to continue?
Thanks, Matt. I did say that, and I have committed after the referendum that we won't be embarking on that. And I want to do that with respect. I want to do that with decency, but I don't want to see further division in the state. And as a result, we have committed to stopping that process, and we will do it in a timely manner, but I didn't set that as one of the 100-day reviews. But I want Queenslanders to know we are serious about delivering for people who particularly live in those remote communities. There's 16 remote Indigenous communities that have a council chamber. I've been in every one, most of them multiple times. I was at Yarrabah the other day. I was at Palm only a month ago. And when I hear them talk about their desire for home ownership, I have a level of excitement. That's the KPIs I'm committing to. I want Indigenous people to own a home where they live. I want to get school attendance rates up. I don't want to see 12 people plus living in a home. And I made a decision. I looked at the referendum. I reflected on the level of vitriol across the community, and I didn't want to create the same mistake that Mr Albanese did in not pivoting at that point. And I'm not going to divide the state. So you haven't heard me use inflammatory language. I don't. I speak about hope, and I'm determined to make sure that through that process we have KPIs for ministers are held accountable and funding to hit the front line, particularly in those remote Indigenous communities.
So no time frame yet in answer to Matt's question?
Well, I didn't put it in the 100-day plan, but I have made a position on that, and as I said, it is a position that will be done with respect, with decency, but we have articulated our vision for that, and our vision involves KPIs for service delivery for First Australians.
All right, we'll have time for one more, I think.
Yeah, just a very quick one to the Premier Stephen Miles on Pioneer Burdekin Dam. We have no idea how much that's going to cost, somewhere between 12 and 24 billion. Can you confirm you'll have to borrow to build that dam?
That's correct, Tim, but they are income-generating assets that will generate a return to Queenslanders basically forever. They draw power down when prices are very, very low, sometimes zero or negative, and sell them back into the national electricity market at night. So the capital cost, you're right, is high, but the operational cost is very, very low, and the revenue from them is very, very high. That compares to the alternatives like nuclear, which have very high capital costs, but also very high ongoing costs. And you have to admit that while the planning might not be completed for Pioneer Burdekin, it is much, much more advanced than the unknown plan for an unknown number of smaller pumped hydros with an unknown number of megawatts in unknown locations.
One more.
G'day, one for the opposition leader, Harry Clark from Sky News. Mr Crisafulli, do you accept Queensland Police data indicating decreases in crime this year and data from Queensland Health indicating decreases in hospital ambulance ramping?
Hi Harry. Victim numbers are at record levels. Queensland has more victims than New South Wales and Victoria, despite the fact we have a smaller population. That is a fact. Victim numbers are the number that I will be held accountable for. There will be fewer victims under the LNP. You mentioned about health. I'm sorry, Harry, but a promise was made that it'd be below 28% by now. A 1% movement in 1 month, I'm sorry, that's not a recovery. That's a blip. For the last 6 months, ambulance ramping has been at 45%. No other Australian state or territory has ever been there. The waiting list has more than doubled for elective surgery. So I'm sorry, Queenslanders aren't popping champagne corks. The health staff aren't saying, oh my goodness, this system's amazing. It is in crisis. We are in a youth crime crisis. We are in a health crisis. And the fact the government won't say those words tells you they will never be able to fix it.
But he's asking if you believe the police data. Do you believe the police data?
Victim numbers.
Harry's asking about the police data. Answer the question.
And I've set a target for fewer victims. You won't commit to that because your heart's not in it.
Premier, will you commit to fewer victim numbers?
We have a community safety plan that is reducing crime, Marlena. Now, one of the reasons the victim numbers have gone up is because we include domestic violence victims and all of those offences, something that the LNP did not do. So the early year data that David compares to does not include domestic violence victims. In fact, they said they were counting the victims that count.
You have one final question each, starting with you, Opposition Leader. Your
Thanks,
last
Marlena.
question.
Stephen, your Labor government has been in power for 3,531 days. This is Labor's and your record. As a Cabinet Minister, you voted to weaken the youth justice laws, which led to the youth crime crisis. As the Health Minister, you didn't properly resource and plan the health system. Now ambulance ramping has climbed from 15% when you came to office to 45%. The surgery waiting list has more than doubled to 62,000. As the Infrastructure and Planning Minister, you oversaw a $2 billion housing investment fund that still hasn't built a single new home in 3 years that Queenslanders are living in. And as Premier, the cost of living pressures facing Queenslanders has never been higher. Is the reason you won't accept responsibility for your record in government because you are embarrassed by it?
Not at all. When you say that things were better 10 years ago, you are trying to tell Queenslanders that things were better under the Campbell-Newman government that you were a part of. You ask about my record, and I am very proud of my record over those 10 years, but I'm especially proud of my record over these last 10 months. I've been honest with Queenslanders. I've shown them who I am and what I believe in. Things like 50-cent fares, $1,000 energy rebates, 20% off Rego, $200 fair play vouchers, free TAFE, free kindy, free tools for first-year apprentices. And now I'm outlining to Queenslanders what I would do if I won a 4-year term, a mandate in my own right. And that would be deliver for them things like cheaper energy prices, cheaper fuel, free school lunches, GP bulk billing practices, 50 of them right across the state. That's my record, and that's me telling Queenslanders what I believe in and what I will do, something you are unable to do.
Premier, your final question.
Thanks, Marlena. David, your only health policy is real-time data, which won't help a single nurse or treat a single patient. But what would really help Queenslanders would be real-time costings, like what we are doing. In your office right now, there will be an Excel spreadsheet that has to the dollar the cost of your unfunded election commitments. Why won't you tell Queenslanders? Why are you making them vote without that knowledge?
Thanks, Premier. I've released with our Shadow Health Minister the most comprehensive health plan ever taken to an election, and the people who I really admire most were the two Queenslanders who stood beside me when I announced it. One was Lauren, whose dad, Wayne, passed away at the end of a ramp because help couldn't arrive because those hardworking doctors and nurses were stuck trying to solve other problems because of an under-resourced system. The other was Steve, whose wife died in his arms waiting for an ambulance who didn't arrive. They've backed that plan, so too have medical groups, and I'm very excited about the prospect of doing it. I'm also excited about doing things on time and on budget, and the Premier can throw figures all he likes. He hasn't been able to explain where the $24 billion for the Pioneer Burdekin thought bubble is coming from. In contrast, we have outlined not only our policies, we've outlined them to the dollar. And the government hasn't been able to punch a hole in one of them, not one. We've stood with third-party groups, outlined it down to the decimal point. We have a lower tax plan. We're going to be the first government since 1977 to abolish a tax on young Queenslanders wanting to build their first new home. We're going to make sure that Queenslanders don't have to be slugged with a patient's tax that's on the books from the 1st of July. We have a lower tax plan, and we have a shadow treasurer who understands about respect for your money. And that's going to be a refreshing change. And Queenslanders will know that when they pay their taxes, projects will be done on time and on budget. And that's the sort of Queensland that we deserve.
All right, we are almost at the end of this. You have time now for your closing remarks. With 2 minutes each, you'll get the warning bell at 30 seconds to go, starting with you, Opposition Leader.
Thanks, Marlena. 4 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, I stood in front of many of you and I spoke about reform of my side of politics. I said that I would return it to the grassroots, and I said I would attract a generation of new candidates. I said that half of those would be women, and I was asked how I could guarantee that would happen, and I was told it couldn't happen. Well, of those 14 marginal seats that I set a target of 7, 10 are women. And they are a generation of Queenslanders I'm very, very proud of. 4 years ago, I spoke of the challenges that were on the horizon. I spoke of those big four crises: youth crime, health, housing, cost of living. The government said we were making up stories. They said it was a media beat-up. When we raised the DNA laboratory, we were told we were politicking. People don't say that anymore. We've had 39 Queensland health crisis town halls where victims have told us what it has been like to be caught up in that system. Brave doctors and nurses who have come and shared their story, that have put forward the plan that we will take to the election to heal that health crisis. Dozens of crime barbecues where young mums have told me what it's like to have to put a child to bed who cries themselves to sleep, asking if the bad man is coming back tonight. And we've put forward the most comprehensive reform to the Youth Justice Act as well as early intervention ever seen before. I have gone and spoken with Queenslanders living in a tent who at 8 a.m. say goodbye to their loved one, pack up the car and go to work, but they can't afford a home where they've lived and where their kids go to school. And while the government was criticising us, we were developing a plan. We were listening to Queenslanders. We were putting forward the case for change. And I want Queenslanders to know that is the plan we are taking to the election. That is the plan that will end the big four crises that are impacting Queenslanders. And after a decade of decline, that is the plan for the fresh start that this state so desperately needs.
Premier?
Thanks, Marlena. Elections are about trust and the future. Queenslanders know me and they know my record. They know what I will do if I am elected on October 26. $1,000 energy rebates, 50-cent fares, 20% off rego, $200 fair play vouchers, more bulk billing, GPs, cheaper fuel, cheaper energy. With me, what you see is what you get. The opposition leader will not answer Queenslanders' questions, and you can't trust someone who won't be honest with you, whether that is on costings, on nuclear power, on the location of pumped hydro dams or water dams here in the southeast, whether it's stadiums or coal royalties or women's rights. With me, you get clear and honest answers. With him, you get rehearsed slogans. You might not agree with my position on everything, but you will always know where I stand and what I stand for. The LNP cannot be honest with Queenslanders. I will always be.
All right, that brings us to the conclusion of our lunch. Thank you both. Please join me in thanking the Premier and the Opposition Leader. Thank you. Thanks. I'd once again like to acknowledge our naming rights partners. Yeah, I'm still on the box. I'd once again like to acknowledge the naming rights partners, Brisbane Airport Corporation, Virgin Australia and Griffith University, as well as our other event partners. As Peter mentioned, the next Queensland Media Club event will be held here on the 12th of November with Senator Murray Watt, Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. I'd like to thank Peter Kelly and the 3+ team for their ongoing management of Queensland Media Club events. For more information on events, please sign up to the mailing list on the QR code, which is on the back of the menu cards on the table. Thank you all for coming along today.